Well, 1,400 documents in the usual late Friday document dump. You know, the White House likes to do that because they're hoping the press doesn't pay that much attention to it. I've taken a look at some of the emails, and what they indicate is that there were clearly internal debates and discussions going on at the Department of Justice, and that, for example, the #2 guy in the criminal division, this is the guy that reports to Lanny Brewer, Lanny Brewer is the political appointee that's ahead of it. The #2 guy was involved in editing this infamous letter that was sent in February to Senator Grassley, in which the Justice Department basically lied, they now admit, lied and said, oh, no, we didn't have any policy of letting guns cross the border into Mexico in Operation Fast and Furious. And so that's a pretty clear indication that at high levels within the Justice Department, they knew what was going on in this operation, they knew it was a problem, and they decided, well, we really don't want to tell Congress about this because it's going to be politically embarrassing.
So when Attorney General Eric Holder goes up Thursday, is he going to sit there again and say, I didn't know about it, I wasn't aware what was going on?
Well, I'm sure he's going to keep that message, but that leaves us with basically two choices, because the evidence is from the emails that his chief of staff knew all about this operation. He was getting memo after memo after memo about it. And if we are to believe that the Attorney General's not lying, that he actually didn't know about it, well, then we have to believe that he's incompetent and his staff is incompetent because they are not telling the Attorney General about an operation that crossed an international border and would clearly have possible consequences to the United States' foreign policy and our relationship with our closest neighbor to the south. You know, you got to choose either that misfeasance or incompetence, and both of them are pretty bad.
But you got a president who's standing by his man.
Yeah, I don't quite understand that either. I wonder whether that will change. On the other hand, the president has not shown in the last 3 years the ability to acknowledge when he's made a mistake.
And that seems to be the problem with this, even with the Attorney General.
Yes.
Responsibility and accountability. And you know, your reaction, he goes up there and he's asked, have you apologized to his family? And just his demeanor alone was just so uncaring, as so many people have pointed out. Oh,
it is. And even worse, you know, just about 2 weeks ago, in the prosecution of the individuals who were involved in the death of our border agent with weapons that were crossed the border through this operation, the Justice Department sealed the court record, which is a very odd thing to have happen in a criminal prosecution. And you know, that's the opposite of the supposedly transparent administration, and you have to sit there and wonder, you know, what else is it they're trying to hide in that case?
Odd to happen for what reason?
Well, this kind of criminal prosecution, there's really no reason to be sealing the file. The only time you seal a file is if you might have some other kind of ongoing operation or undercover operation, and you're afraid it might get discovered. But we've been told that Operation Fast and Furious is over. It's been terminated. So there's really no valid prosecutorial law enforcement reason to be sealing the record, and it's a very odd thing to have happen in a case like this.
And you know, part of this came out that this email sent from the U.S. Attorney Dennis Burke. And in it he says, what is so offensive about this whole project is that Grassley's staff acting as willing stooges for the gun lobby. He says no commentary by Grassley on the lax laws, no mention of greedy gun shop owners, nor careless store purchases. What does that say?
Well, it says that politics was really the driving force behind Burke's approval of an operation that any veteran criminal prosecutor would have said was reckless. And you know, he keeps saying, well, there are loose gun laws. Well, the evidence in this case shows that many of the gun dealers who were asked by the ATF to participate in this operation called the ATF concerned about people who were coming in and buying multiple weapons, and the gun dealers didn't want to sell it to them. In fact, there were cases where there were violations ongoing of federal law. And what happened? The ATF said, no, don't worry, sell them the weapons. because the ATF wanted to see these weapons go across the border so that they then politically could say, oh, see, there is a problem. American guns are ending up in Mexico.
Yeah, it's like we proved the 90% myth wrong.
Right.
So they had to find something else.
Right, right. Look, the mainstream media has not paid a lot of attention to this. They should, because it shows politics and ideology, I think, driving law enforcement, which is something you don't want to have happen. It doesn't matter what the administration is. And of all the scandals we've had in Washington over the last 30 years, this is the only one that has led directly to the deaths of American agents.
And Congressman Joe Walsh came out and said to the media, where are you? Stop protecting both the president and the attorney general. And is that what you think you're seeing in the media?
Oh, I think so. You cannot go back and look at the mainstream media's coverage. And by that, you know, people like the New York Times, NBC. If you look at their coverage of the Bush administration, particularly the Justice Department, where they took things that were not really scandals, like the firing of 8 U.S. attorneys who serve at the pleasure of the president. So they're political appointees, they can be let go at any time. They turned that into this big pseudo fake scandal, and yet here a case where we have people who were killed, where we had thousands of weapons illegally crossing the American border because federal agents were allowing it to happen, and there's been almost no coverage of it. And then we have a Justice Department that appears to have lied and trying to cover up its actual participation and approval of this operation at high levels.
And you keep having this administration and the Attorney General saying, what's really needed here is more laws. We need more gun laws. We need to help the ATF.
Right, and instead, if they had just been enforcing the laws we have, this problem would not have happened in the first place. Or if the president were doing what he apparently doesn't want to do, which is actually enforce our immigration laws and, most importantly, secure the border, you're not going to have a problem with weapons going across the border.
So Thursday, another hearing. What do you think is going to happen after that? I mean, you think we're really going to get anything new out of Holder?
I don't think so. You know, Holder's got his story and he's sticking to it, even though there's a lot to show that he either doesn't know what he's talking about or is not quite telling the truth. The only person that can make him resign is the president. And so far, the president seems to be unconcerned about the mistakes, intentional or not, being made by his Justice Department.
Do you see this becoming already? You're hearing some of the Republican candidates saying, resign. They're making it more of an issue than they were before. Do you see this becoming an issue on the campaign? Should it be?
It should be an issue. Look, we're talking about Operation Fast and Furious right now, but don't forget, we saw the way ideology drives law enforcement decisions from the very first. Remember, they dismissed a voter intimidation case 2 months after they got into office against the new Black Panther Party in Philadelphia. There was video of that. Everyone has seen that. They saw what was going on there, and yet they dismissed it. Why did they do that? Well, because racial politics is such that you don't file lawsuits against minority defendants. That's the position of this administration. And you can see that in that and many other cases where good law enforcement is not driving the decision making. And I can tell you, I worked at the Department of Justice for 4 years. There's a lot of good work done by that department, but the power the prosecutors have is enormous. And when it's used by people for the wrong reasons, that is dangerous. And we've seen, unfortunately, that kind of behavior, not just in Operation Fast and Furious, but in other cases too.
Well, you saw agents come out and say, we got a problem here. But do you think when all is said and done, it's just going to be another thing that's pushed aside?
Unfortunately, it looks like it. I mean, many of the agents are complaining, those who have become whistleblowers, that they're being disciplined for having done that. And, you know, if the ATF really, if they really wanted to show they've learned from their mistakes here, then the people who were whistleblowers about this, the agents who warned that this was a bad program, they would be promoted, they would be put into better positions. That's not happening.
But the people who are involved were either just reassigned, reshuffled.
That's right.
I mean, and that's the answer to it? Is that what we're going to have to settle on, do you think?
Unfortunately so. The other thing that needs to happen, and Congressman Issa and Senator Grassley are certainly trying to do it, is, look, Congress needs to use its power of oversight to try to get to the bottom of this. And quite frankly, if the ATF or the Justice Department need to be punished for their behavior, they can also do that through the budget and appropriations process by hitting their budget and reducing it in places where it needs to be reduced.
What about a special prosecutor?
Well, there have been calls for that. You know, under the law that we have today, there no longer is a special prosecutor office. What can happen is the Attorney General can appoint a special prosecutor who then doesn't report to him, but it's almost always one of the existing U.S. attorneys. And the call for that came quite a while ago, and so far Eric Holder has ignored it.